All right. So I hurt my back uh, at the trampoline park. I was trying to be a youngin' playing hard, and my back got hurt. And so I came up in the attic and was working over here, back, and it was hurting my back. So I was thinking, man, I wish I knew some young person I could trust to come clean all this up for me. And so I said, hey, I have a son. And so my 7 year old is going around and picking up the debris, the trash, putting it in a trash bag, and then we're going to vacuum this whole thing. And so I'm going to pay him. And I said he couldn't play the Nintendo Switch until after this is all done. The So that's that. But they were my 7 year old son and my 5 year old daughter. They got mad at each other, angry. They both thought the other person was um, not being fair. This could be called angry, self-righteous echo chambers. Um, I use that phrase based on a direct message I'm doing with Schlief. Um, but the way that I handled the situation was that I brought them to their rooms, and my son, he's good at listening, and he listened. He was mad, but he listened. My 5 year old girl, she wasn't listening very well. And so eventually I told my son that he could leave his room. And we stood there in the hallway talking to each other. And so my daughter was just not being, not thinking. She was not thinking. It's like her mind was in a loop about how it was not fair. It was not fair. And then they would start getting angry at each other again if they argue, basically yelling at each other about you're not fair, you're not fair. And so what I managed to do is to the way I got my 5 year old daughter out of it is I asked my son. So the argument was about the cushions on the couch, and all these cushions, they are not attached. And so I asked my son, how many cushions are there on the couch? And all of a sudden, my daughter, you could see her brain start working, and she had an answer. And I said, no, let's let my son do it. And so my son gave an answer. I said, okay, that was your answer. Now let's let my daughter answer. And she went and she did it, and she gave me an answer, and she gave me the right answer. My son's answer wasn't right, but then I was able to point and say, my son, his strength. So we all have strengths and weaknesses. One of his strengths is that he's listening really well. Like when we came up in the attic a few days ago, he couldn't help but go and pick things up. Like his mind is doing that. And then my daughter, her mind, she has this imagination. She's able to imagine the couch and imagine all the cushions on the couch. And my son's good at math. It's just that imagination is a different skill set, right? But then once I triggered that within my daughter, her mind calmed down and she relaxed. And so it was like I activated her strength. That's how I described it. But I activated this neural pathway that then returned control back to her. And I thought that was really interesting. Um, and so the way I can activate it with my son is through communicating with words. And the way I've learned with my daughter now, the way I can do that is I can kind of spark her imagination to get her mind into that place where she just naturally has this gift. And it allowed her to escape from you know, that trap of being angry at the other person. Um, So that was I thought that was amazing, because Schlief was saying that in politics, we're kind of encouraged to not communicate with the other because they cannot um, have a conversation with you, which then causes you to stay in an angry, self-righteous echo chamber. And the question is like, well, how do you get people out of that? Well, you have to develop a relationship with a person in order to understand their strengths and weaknesses. And if you wanted to fast track it, know your own strengths and weaknesses and be able to communicate them to others. And then when a mind is in that angry, self-righteous echo chamber feedback loop, you can then provide a stimulus or a catalyst to get the mind to break out of that, um, just that feedback loop that's destructive, that's not constructive. That's my theory. I was kind of amazed. This was my first success story with my daughter, and maybe that speaks to me just not being the best dad in the world. But yeah, it's maybe it's something that our species hasn't figured out, like how to help people break out of a angry, self-righteous feedback loop echo chamber, right? Because some problems are hard. Like the problem that they were having was a hard problem. They were both not being fair, and the solution wasn't obvious. And no matter what solution you came up with, there could be another solution. So, an infinite amount of solutions. But they were stuck on accusing the other person of not being fair, rightfully so. No, nothing was changing. They were just stuck. The mind was stuck. So there it is. I hope you'll have a good one.